I recently bought something new for my sewing room, and it is possibly my most used gadget at the moment. I bought the HTV Ront Heat Press to replace a larger heat press as I needed something that was a little bit more compact. And I thought I'd do a video today to talk you through how it works and also to show you how I use it for interfacing. So when I was buying this heat press, I did a lot of research. I watched a lot of different videos on it. A lot of the videos were actually for using vinyl, which is primarily what this heat press is aimed at. I couldn't really find any videos of people using it for interfacing, which is what I was wanting to use it for. So I thought I would do the video today to show you the setup of the machine, how it works, the different settings, and then how I use it to apply my interfacing during my bag making projects. I've just plugged in the heat press. When it's plugged into the electrical source, it will flash with this button here. It isn't on, but it will flash when it is plugged in. So to turn it on, you simply press the button once and it will power up. And this little panel here will populate with different numbers. So this button is the temperature button. And I currently have mine set at 360. That can change up or down to whatever you want it to be. So when you change it, it'll beep again, and that means that temperature is what it's set at as a maximum. And it's currently heating up, and it's telling me that it's at 239, 240, and it will continue to climb until it's at the maximum temperature of 360. This little button here will remain red until it is at temperature, at which point it will turn green. This button here is the timer. So this shows the time that it's set to, which is currently 12 seconds, but you can change it by pressing this button and then again the up and down buttons, and then press the button again to set the time. This figure here shows the level of pressure that is being applied when you are pressing facing to the piece of fabric that you're applying it to. So its automatic default is £6. That is the weight of the machine. But when you press onto it, it will change and show you the amount of pressure that is being applied. So once this button turns to green, that means that it is at temperature. And I'll just quickly show you how I use this press to apply the two different types of interfacing that I mainly use as a bag maker, which is obviously woven interfacing and non-woven interfacing, because I do apply them at different temperatures, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so I'm going to show you with non-woven first, because I always apply non-woven at a slightly cooler temperature. This is because I find it can sort of burn and shrivel if the temperature is too high. You're always best off starting at a slightly lower temperature. If you find it's not adhering properly, you're not getting a good fix, you can always increase your temperature and just keep applying. Whereas if you have your temperature set too hot, you can ruin your interfacing and your fabric, which are obviously both quite precious pieces of equipment or supplies. How I apply is I'm going to lay my piece of fabric down first. This is cotton fabric. So I tend to work in cotton fabrics for things like linens, that sort of thing. So then I would apply my non-woven interfacing over the top, and I always protect with a Teflon sheet. Now you can use another piece of fabric, and you can use a pressing cloth. Whatever your preference is fine. I just use Teflon sheets because it's what I've got at hand and it's what I'm used to using now. I'm going to set my time for 10 seconds because that's what I want to press at. And I'm going to lift off and apply over the fabric and the interfacing through the Teflon sheet. I press this button and it counts down. And where I'm holding it, it also shows how hard I am pressing onto the fabric. So I then take my piece off, I turn over, and I do exactly the same on the opposite side. And I'll just see if I can get in a little bit closer to show you the panel as I'm pressing. So I'm going to lift it over, I'm going to press the button, it counts down, and it also shows the level of pressure that I'm applying as I hold it. I'm not pushing really hard, I'm just pressing sort of firmly, and then that is applied really well. It isn't bubbling up anywhere, it hasn't missed any pieces, it's applied really evenly throughout the whole piece. So that is non-woven. I'm then going to increase my temperature slightly, and I'm going to go up to about 375. I'm going to do exactly the same with my woven interfacing. So I find with the woven, I need to go a little bit higher. Woven interfacing, you don't use any steam. Obviously the press doesn't have a steam facility. If I find that I do need steam in order to get a good adhesion, to get it to stick really well, all I will do is spray the piece of fabric before I put the interfacing on, just lightly, and that will create steam coming up to activate that glue. Now I do quite often use steam with non-woven interfacing, but I have found with this press I haven't needed to use steam as much to get non-woven interfacing to stick well. It just does stick really well. I don't have it coming apart after it's cooled down. It stays adhered really, really well. I'm just going to repeat the process exactly the same way as I did with the other fabric and interfacing. I've just gone up ever so slightly in temperature. I'm going to cover that with the Teflon sheet and start it off by pressing this R button, holding it nice and firmly but not applying a massive amount of pressure, and then when it beeps, lifting it off, turning it over and repeating the process. Now obviously I'm showing you on around about 6 square inch piece of fabric and interfacing. With a larger piece, all you would need to do is make sure that you have the area covered with a cloth or a Teflon sheet or whatever it is that you're using to protect your interfacing and fabric, and then you will apply the press for the 10 seconds, let it beep, and then you will literally just move it round, let that go for 10 seconds. When it beeps, move it again, and then move it again. It can take a little bit longer than using one of the big 15-16 inch presses that can do quite large pieces. But what I have found that I prefer about this than a heat press is I find it easier personally to move the press than to move the fabric within the press, if that makes sense. I find I don't get as many wrinkles, I don't get any creases. That's one of the reasons why I've actually found I've used this a lot more than what I actually thought I would. I bought it primarily because I don't have a great deal of space on this area, and I also do events where I take equipment backwards and forwards too, so I thought it was a little bit more transportable as well. But then I've actually ended up using it as my sole heat press over the last few months. Back to this piece of fabric. So you can see that that has adhered really well. I don't have any bubbling. It doesn't have any bits that aren't stuck. It's really evenly pressed, and I would then just leave that to cool before I went ahead and start to use this pattern piece. I'll show you quickly just how I would then put on some decovil, and I'll just use this piece because it's there, and we'll just apply some decovil onto this piece. Now when I'm applying decovil, I do always use a little spray of water. Don't use loads, just one kind of spray per area is fine. I'm then going to place my decovil on, and I use round about the same temperature for decovil as what I've used here. The only time that would change is if I was sticking the decovil to something different than cotton. So say I was applying it to vinyl or the wool directly, or a cork or something like that, I would probably take my temperature down to about 355 and see whether that worked. If it wasn't quite sticking, I'd just keep going up in 5-degree increments until it was sticking. But that way I wouldn't be going too high for the other fabric that's underneath, because you do have to take your temperature down a little bit when you're using things like vinyls or anything with the wool in, or corks, that sort of thing. So just bear in mind what you're applying to, as well as the interfacing that you're applying. We shall stick the decovil on, and I'm just using exactly the same process as I used for the interfacing, around about 10 seconds, and then I'm going to see how well that's stuck once it's beeped. And hopefully you can see that that has stuck really well all the way around. You can, if you want to, turn it over and do a second press from the other side. Again, just bearing in mind that if you are putting decovil onto something like a vinyl, maybe it's letting the vinyl cool down, just that you're not letting it stretch or anything like that. And that is that decovil, perfectly adhered to that piece of fabric. I'm so impressed with this heat press for how much it costs in relation to other heat presses. I think it does an absolute fantastic job. And then once you're done, it's as simple as turning it off and unplugging it from the power source, and the light will go out and it will eventually cool down. One other thing to mention is it does come with this amazing stand, really strong. It is plastic, but it's it's more like a resin. It's really strong. It's not flimsy. It holds the heat press really well. I'm not worried about it when the heat press is on, it causing any problems. I have actually dropped it twice and it's been absolutely fine. So the whole quality and structure of it I find really good. So hopefully you found the little video that I've just done there on interfacing using the HTV Ront 10-inch press useful. Like I said, I've certainly been impressed by it. I don't actually have a lot of experience with heat presses. I've only had one in the past before, so this is only sort of my second time having a different type of heat press, and this is the first time having that sort of heat press. So I am really impressed with it. I think it's been a fantastic addition to my sewing room. I found it's as quick to press my interfacing as using one of the big heat presses where you pull it down, because like I said before, I find not having to move the fabric within the heat press far easier. I find moving the heat press itself much easier. And then if I've got any little bits to go over, like say if I've missed a little bit in the middle, it's much easier to sort of be very direct and specific about where you need to direct your heat. So thank you for joining me, and please do, if you've enjoyed the video, give it a like. It really does help small creators like me get seen on that big wide world thing that is YouTube. And please do subscribe to the channel for future videos. I'll see you next time. Bye.